I'd like to share my screen. Do I have screen sharing capability?
You should.
Give me 1 second. I junk on my screen.
We can see it.
There we go. Yes. It's even spelled correctly.
Yay. Okay.
All right, you can start timing. Today, we're going to talk about time management. This is a abridged version of a course I'm going to be teaching in September to a group of managers, of new managers, talking to them about time management. But this is something that really applies to everybody everywhere. So we have some objectives because this is going to be a course. At the end of this presentation, you should be able to describe the concept of time management if I've done my job properly, explain why time management is important and not just for managers, and identify several strategies for time management. And in my real course, I'm going to probably have more strategies, but we'll try to keep it within the 15 to 20 minutes. What is time management? Well, time management is the way you organize your day. It's a way of making sure everything important gets done, and it's a way of making sure you don't burn out. Those are 3 important goals. There are several time management styles. You would probably recognize yourself in more than one of these. I certainly have found myself being one or another of these time management types, depending on the project, the time, and the job. But we'll go through them really quickly. There's the early bird. The early bird gets up early in the morning and tackles the to-do list. They want to get everything done as soon as possible. That's great. But sometimes, in the interest of checking things off the list, they aren't done. They get done, but they aren't done well. Now we have the adrenaline junkie. That's the person who leaves it to the very last minute because they love the rush of getting it done right by the deadline. It drives managers crazy when their employees do this, but some people get a real charge out of that, and they know they're going to get it done in time, but it tends to lead to procrastination. And sometimes when you're working under pressure like that, 2 things happen. One is that you're getting it done, but you don't get it done well. And the other thing is you may be spending your time on other things that are not important instead of this thing that you're supposed to be doing because you're leaving it to the last minute. We have the overcommitter. The overcommitter never met a project he or she didn't like or didn't want to do. You want to be on all the committees. You want to have all the cases. You want to take all the courses. It's a problem of having too much and not really being able to prioritize which things are important. You also might find yourself doing other people's work because there's a project that should be going to Susie, but you take it on because you're interested in it, and then Susie doesn't have enough work to do and you're overloaded. Again, not necessarily getting things done well. Then you have an underestimator. I'm a chronic underestimator. For example, this morning, it took me 45 minutes to get to work. So in my mind, it only takes 45 minutes to get to work, but we know it really takes an hour on most days. The underestimator can't remember how long it takes to do a task and doesn't allot it enough time and ends up rushing. And then you start looking a little like the adrenaline junkie, only you don't get a charge out of it. You just get frustrated by it. Now we have the perfectionist. The perfectionist is the person who lets the perfect be the enemy of the good. We can never finish a project because there's always another proofread or another small change to make, or maybe we should do a little bit more research. And it may be that it gets done well, but it may not get done at all. And the last person is a squirrel chaser. I have a picture in my mind of Greg saying, bright, shiny new object. That's the squirrel chaser. Something's going by and you're attracted to it and you want to go do that instead of whatever thing it is that's on your desk that needs to be done. That could be email, but it could also be any interruption or other activity. Like you want to watch a video instead of working on a project. So it's someone who's particularly susceptible to distraction, self-destruction. Why is time management especially important for managers? A manager is managing not only their own time, but the time of their team. So in terms of getting things done, you have to get your projects done, you have to get the team's projects done. So it's important to be managing all of that. You may be managing your own deadlines as well as your team's deadlines. And so it's important for the manager to have good time management skills and, among other things, model them for their direct reports. It's also a matter of not burning out. As a new manager, you might have been the subject matter expert in a topic, and now somebody else is the subject matter expert and you're managing them. If you try to do their work and your work, you will be burned out very quickly because you just can't do it all. I found in my current position, because I've got new topics for which I'm not the subject matter expert, it's a lot easier to let the people do the work. They brief me and I tell them, what my opinion is, but they're doing all the work, not me. It's much harder where I'm something where I used to be the expert because I want to get down into the weeds. And it's important that from time management's perspective to not do that. We all have a propensity, though, not to manage our time well. So here are some time management skills to think about when we're thinking about a time management program. The first thing you have to be able to do is set goals and objectives. If you don't know where you're going, there's no way you're going to ever get there. So the first thing to do is figure out, what are you supposed to be accomplishing? What is the point? It's like going on a trip. You need to figure out what your destination is. And after you've figured out what your goal is, then you have to identify the tasks or the projects that will get you to your goal, and you have to prioritize them. You have to figure out which one's important and which one needs to be done first, and perhaps figuring out which ones don't need to be done. And that's where we get to delegating. You might discover that there's something that needs to be done, but doesn't need to be done by you. My executive coach gave me some really good advice. Ask yourself, when a project comes in your door, does it need to be done now? That is it important? Does it need to be done by me? And the answer is frequently no. And then the question is, who can I give this to who will do a good job on it? So it's important to delegate as much as possible. And that does two things. It frees your team, it gives your team something to do, and it frees you up to do other things. There's never a shortage of other things to do. Another piece of delegating is knowing when to say no, that the project doesn't need to be done. It's bright and it's shiny, but now is not the time. And knowing when not to take something on is extremely important in managing your time. The next topic here is single tasking. Now, we all multitask. I'm sure somebody's checking their email or doing something, looking at their phone while I'm speaking. And we think that we can multitask effectively, but there have been studies that show that when you're trying to do two different things, you're not doing either one well. And when you get distracted by something, it takes you maybe a long time to actually regain your focus. So as a goal in time management, if you've figured out where you're going and you figured out what you need to do and when you're going to do it, you can focus in on each thing while you're working on it. And then when you finish that task, you can move on to the next task. A piece of single tasking is reducing your distractions. Think about trying to cook dinner and your kids are running in and somebody needs a permission slip signed and somebody has a problem they want solved and somebody wants your attention for this. And as everybody interrupts you, the onions are burning on the stove because you just can't focus on everything. When it comes to work, it's helpful to be in a place that has fewer distractions. That might mean something that's a quiet room, or closing your door so that people don't barge in on you. You could turn off your phone. You could turn off your email. Some of us just try to ignore the email, but it's hard. Email comes in and it beeps at you and says, look at me, and it's hard not to look. One way people sometimes handle email is to schedule a time during the day. A half an hour after lunch, I'm going to work my email, not going to look at it the rest of the day. I will admit that that's difficult. Avoiding procrastination. Part of managing your time is figuring out what you're going to do and when you're going to do it. And if you have scheduled something, it's less likely to be left to the last minute if you've given it a proper priority. And the last thing here is reducing stress. It's important to schedule as part of your time for relaxation. Maybe you want to meditate. Maybe you want to take a walk. It may be necessary if you're very busy to actually put that time on your calendar and schedule that so that you don't lose track of the things that may not be important to your work, but they're important to your health. And so those are also important things that are part of your time management menu. I'm going to talk about 4 methods of time management. There are many, probably as many as there are people, and there's certainly no one size fits all. There's one that's popularized by Stephen Covey in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's also known as the Eisenhower Matrix. I'm going to go through each one separately in its own slide. There's the Getting Things Done method. This is written about by David Allen in his book named, of course, Getting Things Done, The Art of Stress-Free Productivity. I have actually tried both of these methods and come up with something that's kind of a hybrid. There's the Pomodoro method, which is a way of timing, figuring out when forcing yourself to do work in a particular period of time, and Eat the Frog, which I just love. And we'll get to that in a couple minutes. Okay, here's the Eisenhower Matrix. This takes all of your tasks and helps you prioritize them, because as I said, after you figured out what your goal is, you have to figure out what you need to do and whether it's important. So this categorizes all your tasks into whether they're urgent or important. In quadrant 1, you have all the things that are urgent and important. That's the work you should be doing right now because it's important and it needs to get done. And you should spend most of your time on quadrant 1 tasks. But then you have quadrant 2. These things are also important, but they're not urgent. So those are tasks that you're going to want to schedule for another time. And that's where prioritizing comes in, and maybe making a schedule of some sort, which some of the other time management techniques talk about. You want to figure out when you're going to do those, because they're still important. They just don't need to be done right now. Then we have things in quadrant 3. These are not important, but they're urgent. That's like the email that comes in asking you about purchasing something that you're not really interested in. It's the Land's End email, and it's really not important, and it's certainly not urgent, but it's coming there. It's really shouldn't be urgent, but it's interrupting you. These are things that you want to minimize. You might be, if they're really urgent, you might be able to delegate them to somebody else. If they're really not important, perhaps you can skip them altogether, but they interrupt you and you have to try to minimize them. And in quadrant 4 are the things that are neither urgent nor important. Those are tasks that you should probably cross off your list as things that you really don't need to do, because they're taking up your time and you really shouldn't be spending your time on them. That might be your morning Wordle, although I do it too, but it's not urgent and it's really not important, but it's a lot of fun. And if you think of that as your relaxation or meditation or exercise, maybe it's important, but not urgent, and you're going to schedule it for a particular time during the day. Now we have the Getting Things Done method. This is a method that has several steps. It allows you to brainstorm your tasks and make them into a to-do list. So this is partially prioritization and partially scheduling. So under this method, the idea is, if you have to keep all of your tasks in your head, you're surely going to forget something, and then you spend time worrying about what you're not remembering. So you write down everything you have to do. And then, or if it's in your email inbox, you identify everything you need to do, and then you categorize them. These are things that relate to home. This relates to this particular project. This relates to this other project, so that you can figure out where they belong. And you might also categorize them as things that need to be done now, and things that need to be done tomorrow, and things that need to be done next week. But anyway, you've categorized all your tasks so you know where they belong. And every time something comes up, you write it down and put it on a list. This allows you to clear your brain of what do I need to do, because you know it's all on the list. So you've preserved that and you don't have to worry about forgetting. But an important part of this categorizing tasks is, well, when do you put it on the list? So Alan's method suggests that if it's something that you can do in 2 minutes or less, you should just do it. Instead of trying to figure out when you're going to do it, just do it now and get it over with, and then you never have to think about it again. So that's even better than scheduling it for later. the obvious problem there is like with email, you could have 2 minutes here, 2 minutes here, 2 minutes here, and you never get to anything else because you're constantly doing small 2-minute things that aren't terribly important, but they can be disposed of easily. And a similar idea is the one-touch method. This is really more something that works with mail than email. But when the mail comes in and it lands in the front hallway, or you get it from your mailbox, you pick up the envelope. If it's trash, you throw it away now. You don't pick up the pile and look through it and say, oh, some of this is trash, and put the pile down, because then you got to do it again, and that wastes time. So the idea being to try to not to handle any task more frequently than you need to. So one thing that sort of gets me is I'll open an email and say, this is going to take too long. I need to see what this is about, but now I'm not going to do it now. And I've just wasted time looking at it, and I should have just put it aside. One of the key points of getting things done is constantly reviewing your list. And that's a place where I think it's very helpful if you keep a to-do list. Like every night before you go to bed or first thing in the morning, you go through the list and figure out what is it that's important for today. It might not be the same thing that was a priority yesterday. You might want to rearrange them. So you're constantly reviewing the list to see if things are completed and to see what needs to be done next. It also helps to break down tasks into small pieces, because then you can attack them methodically and you don't have this very large project that you can't attack. So this is a way of prioritizing and making sure that things don't get lost in the shuffle. Now we have the Pomodoro method. I like this one too. It was based on some writings by Francesco Cirillo. He had a timer that was shaped like a tomato, and he used this for his method. And so it's called the Pomodoro method, but you can do it with any kind of timer. And under this method, you have a project that you need to attack and you're not getting to it because for whatever reason you're having trouble. I used this method with my son when he would come home from school and he had 12 different assignments for homework and he couldn't decide what to do first. We'd be like, pick one, work on it for 10 minutes. So that's a modification. But under this method, you turn on the timer for 25 minutes and you work on whatever the project is that you need to work on. And when the timer goes off, you stop and you take a 5-minute break. You reward yourself with M&Ms, right? Or something like that. And then you do it again, 25 minutes on, 5-minute break. And after you've done 4 cycles, which is about 2 hours, you can take a 20-minute break. And this is sort of a way of making you get your nose to the grindstone and scheduling something, a time to get something done, which is sometimes helpful for people. And the last method I'm going to talk about, as I said, eat the frog. Mark Twain said, if it's your job to eat a frog, it's best to do it first thing in the morning. And if it's your job to eat 2 frogs, it's best to eat the biggest one first. The idea here is you pick out the worst task, the most important, the thing that needs to be done. And maybe it's the thing that you least want to get to. And you do that first, because otherwise it's that thing that's hanging over your head and you can't focus on the other things you need to do because you really should be doing the frog. So start with the frog, get it out of the way, and now you are free to do what else you need to do. Think of it as eating your peas before getting your dessert. So those are the 4 time management techniques. They are ways of, after you've figured out what your objective is, identifying your tasks, prioritizing your tasks. Some of these methods, other methods you could use, how to schedule your tasks so that you know when you're going to do them. Like you can put them on a calendar and figure these are today's tasks, these are tomorrow's tasks. And then you can tackle your tasks and try to avoid the interruptions so that you'll get everything done by the end of the day or by the time they're due. So I'm now open for questions. And I'm going to take off the sharing so I can see everybody. There we go. Scott.
Your preferred method solution, what is it that you use and find successful?
I actually have a to-do list at work. It's from my, because you can put a red flag on your email. So every time something comes in that's on an email, I click the red flag so that I have a to-do list of all the important emails. And I also create some extra tasks that are not email related. And I check that every morning and every night. And I get great pleasure out of crossing things off. And I shift things around depending on what needs to be important.
You use computer or paper?
Computer. Used to use paper. I have a paperless too, but it's not nearly as effective.
Do you use reminders at all on like a phone, on a smartphone or something like that?
I don't.
What did you think
Yep.
of the Getting Things Done book? I read that before. I started on Eat That Frog, but it was interesting. Like you had a whole system.
I found that getting things done was a little complicated. I've certainly adopted parts of it, but it was way too complicated. And in some of my research, I've seen things where you get a day planner. It's a whole system, and I guess it works for some people. But the key is to find the system that works best for you, and it might be a hybrid. So Jennifer, you had your hand up.
That was my question. It seems like you wouldn't just do one of those things. It seems like the ideas are very sound, and sometimes it's a conglomeration of all of them.
Yep. And I think we're at time. So I'm going to say thank you, everybody, for your questions.
Thank you, Laura. Very interesting and very helpful.